evening. My name is Paul Adams. I'm the Artistic Director of the Emerging Artists Theater Company. I want to welcome you here tonight. This is our Best Of series where we invite back artists that have a certain caliber of performance and a special creativity. So we want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy Billy Hipkins, the also-ranism.
Jennie Gourlay was an actress. I first encountered Jennie on a trip to Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. Now, being an actor myself, I know that when one is in D.C., one must go to Ford's. A showbiz pilgrimage, if you will. Ford's Theater and Our American Cousin, that's the title of the play that President Abraham Lincoln was enjoying on the night that he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, are easy punchlines for a lot of theater jokes like the old, "So other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like the show?" I have used this event as a punchline of my own, too. You see, showbiz hasn't always treated me the way that I had hoped that it would, which has at times convinced me that in a past life, I must have shot Lincoln. And now I'm living some karmic payback. I sometimes get a laugh with that. I sometimes actually believe it. Now, Ford's Theater isn't actually in any of these jokes, but it is the scene of the crime. It's the stage within a stage upon which a major event in U.S. history played out. So, a few years back in Ford's auditorium, after a thankfully brief lecture by some guy dressed like a park ranger, Anyway, after his lecture, which I tuned out, I am conditioned to tune out historical lectures. I'm hoping that you are not so inclined. After his lecture, we are free to wander the basement museum where the relics from this event are housed. Here we find a stovepipe hat, a once white shirt, now yellow with what looks like rust all over it. That would be the president's blood, and various mounted plaques and photographs detailing the assassination. I'm looking over these artifacts, not terribly interested, I must say. Oh, look, a gun. Then there behind plexiglass, I see something amid the information on the theater itself. It is an actual handbill from that historic performance of Our American Cousin on April 14th, 1865. And this handbill reads, "Benefit of Miss Laura Keene." She was the star of the show. And underneath that are a list of all the Misters and Misses who were in the company that night. And underneath all of this, at the bottom of this tattered handbill, I see that on the following night, on April 15th, they will be presenting the Octoroon for the benefit of Miss Jennie Gourlay. And when I saw this, my brain woke up. Wait a minute. Now, clearly, the night after the beloved leader of the nation is assassinated, and by an actor, no less, the show does not go on. So, what happened to this girl? What happened to her career? I scanned back over the handbill. She and two other Gourlays are listed in the American Cousin cast. So these Gourlays are an acting family here at Ford, supporting visiting star Laura Keene, but tomorrow night, their very own Miss Jennie Gourlay will be the star. So what happened to this girl? Now, back then, an actor could buy the exclusive rights to a script for a rather low flat fee and perform that piece into the ground if they so chose. And that is what Miss Laura Keene has done with Our American Cousin. By the time she gets to Ford's, she has reportedly played it over 1,000 times. She is now on tour with it in her repertoire, filling in the rest of the roles city by city with actors from each of the resident companies, like the Gourlay family, of each of the theaters that she plays. Her limited run at Ford's is ending that night with her benefit performance. A benefit performance means that 50% of the gross proceeds from that particular performance would go to her. Benefit indeed. And once Miss Laura Keene and her trunks of costumes are on their way to Cincinnati, Miss Jennie Gourlay will have her turn as leading lady in her benefit performance of the Octoroon. Let me tell you about the Octoroon. Okay, first off, the term Octoroon refers to a person who is of 1/8 African ancestry. I sincerely doubt that it is considered a politically correct term nowadays, but at the time, it was a commonly used term to help classify and rank people, something we don't do anymore. The Octoroon premiered in 1859 amid threats of violence toward its leading lady, should she appear upon the stage as said Octoroon. You see, this is the very first script to address slavery as a serious subject. It is a major melodrama concerning a free Octoroon girl named Zoe, who is loved by a white man who does not know that she is of 1/8 African ancestry. Financial ruin has forced the sale of her beloved plantation home, and the villain behind this deed plans to sell Zoe back into slavery. Here is how the characters refer to Zoe's condition. She is said to have a Negro taint, the ineffaceable curse of Cain, a bluish tinge in the fingernails, eye whites, and hair roots. Seriously? Once her faithful lover learns this, he still insists upon marrying her, but she refuses him, saying that it would break the heart of his aunt. He says to her, "Zoe, must we immolate our lives on her prejudice?" And she answers him, "Yes, for I would rather be black than ungrateful." Ah, George, our race has at least one virtue. It knows how to suffer. Seriously? Seriously. Now, this play was very popular for years. Countless actresses had played Zoe by the time that Jenny got around to playing it, or not playing it. And I choose to believe that her portrayal could have made Jenny a star. Now, it could be that April 15th, 1865 was going to be just another night on the boards for this young actress, the 47th time she'd played that Octoroon surrounded by her fellow resident company members. No stars in sight, no stars in her eyes, no hope of rising to greater theatrical heights as a result of this one particular performance on this one beneficial night. Simply and realistically, no desire for it. We can't all be Laura Keene. But I choose to believe that this was it. The payoff from years of studying from the wings, of playing an endless parade of maids and rustic types and frail ingenues. But on the night of April 15th, as the tragic Octoroon, Miss JENNIE GOURLAY would beguile the crowd and the legions of agents and producers and critics who would happen to be on hand. I additionally choose to believe that they had legions of agents and producers and critics on hand for Jenny's benefit. That shot, that canceled out her shot at stardom, immediately called to me. A me that had spent decades with visions of Tony Awards dancing in my head. A me with an unproducible script sitting in a drawer beside my mediocre, if interesting, acting resume from a career now gone stagnant. A me that had recently retired from the stage and taken up a wardrobe career on Broadway, while still longing for more. On stage more. At the time, I wanted to blame that lack of what I called success on some outside event too. So I knew when I saw her name on that handbill, I needed to find out how her life played out. Miss Laura Keene is a known star from that era. Miss JENNIE GOURLAY is not. She is an also-ran in the theater, just like me. We are also-rans, Jenny and I. We have also-ranism. So I am here to tell the also-ran story, so we will both be more than just a footnote in theater history. Now, the first steps I took were to search for her on the internet, and I'm going to tell you, I did not find much. On Miss Laura Keene, yes. Did you know that Miss Laura Keene has her own Wikipedia page? She was the first woman to manage an acting company here in America. She also owned several theaters, and she was the very first to do matinees. I curse her every Wednesday at 2 p.m. This is her, Miss Laura Keene. Let me tell you my thoughts about Miss Laura Keene. I have decided that she is the villain of this piece. All right, true, she didn't pull the trigger and change everything for Jenny in the world, but I've decided that she was a conceited bitch. I've read that she was capable of temper tantrums and once threw goldfish across the room. Other than that, I have absolutely no evidence to support this claim, but since this is my show, please just allow it. I have decided that Starkeen is condescending, insecure, and grasping to retain her youth, especially when playing next to young, sweet Jennie. I have decided that she makes Jennie play all of her scenes facing upstage so as not to attract comparison. And by the way, from all the photographs I've seen of her, Miss Laura Keene was a bit of a butterface. Do I need to explain butterface? She's got a great body, but her face. Every photograph I've seen of her shows a woman with dead shark eyes. Now, in Our American Cousin, Miss Keene is playing Florence Trenchard, an English rose. It's not much of a part, really. I'm surprised she'd even bother with it unless she was lazy. Miss Laura Keene was a lazy, goldfish-throwing butterface. In American Cousin, Jennie is playing Mary Meredith, a poor cousin to our leading lady, a simple girl who runs a small dairy on a corner of their rustic English estate. Keene's character is ever so sweet to her, treats her like a beloved pet. In their first scene together, she laughingly tells Jennie that she's come to see her on grave business, and Jennie's character responds, "You, grave business? Why, I thought you never had any graver business than being very pretty, very amiable, and very ready to be amused." I've decided that Jennie's been told to give this line directly to the audience so they're sure to understand Keene's character is meant to be seen as pleasing. I have further decided that Jennie and the rest of the company will be happy to see this butterface egomaniac leave after tonight's benefit performance. So, I found this encyclopedia that lists actors from the 19th century. It is this odd, heavy tome listing any and all quotes and reviews these actors had written about them, and Miss JENNIE GOURLAY isn't in it. And I'm dismayed. There are tons of actors remembered here. How could she not be among them? Did her career really end that night at Ford's Theater? And if not, where are her reviews? A little while later, a friend of mine took a trip to Milford, Pennsylvania. And while she's there, she checked out brochures on what's to do in Milford. Not much, I assure you. And she came across information on the Columns, a museum run by the Pike County Historical Society, which has in its possession the Lincoln flag. Yes, the Lincoln flag. The Lincoln flag was part of the decorations on the box at Ford's Theater that President Lincoln sat in on the night that he was assassinated. It was reportedly pulled down and put under his head as he lay dying. It now has a dark stain on it, which is believed to be the president's blood. It was rescued from the scene of the crime by one T.C. Gourlay, who was in the acting company that night, who eventually passed it on to his daughter, JENNIE GOURLAY, who ended up living out her life in Milford. So I contact the Pike County Historical Society. Now, I'm expecting to speak with some musty old librarian type who will scoff at my request for information, who will bristle and tell me that the flag is in fact on display, but that any and all information concerning Miss Gourlay is strictly classified and not to be ogled by also-rans with dubious intentions. Well, instead I speak with a woman who answers my questions with a simple, "Yeah, we got that. I can send you some articles about her if you like. What's your address?" Well, God bless her, she must have made photocopies before she took a break, because within days, I receive a manila envelope of articles about the Lincoln flag and Jennie, and I see her for the first time. Jennie, I found you. Her eyes look sad to me, like they see something huge and terrible right ahead. Well, most of what I received from Pike County is about the Lincoln flag, just tidbits about her life and career. And as excited as I am, I'm also dismayed. It seems clear that she is remembered, if at all, only for having been there when. Not for her life, not for her work, but for her proximity to a tragedy and a bloody flag. I want to take those articles and that encyclopedia of actors and chuck them across the room. And at the same time, all of this is leaving me feeling vindicated. You see, there it is. Proof by negation. We can't all be Laura Keene. And yes, I am taking this very personally. I have to confess, I am amazed at my sudden desire to delve into this corner of American history. I never showed the slightest interest before this. I was planning to be a famous actor. What the hell do I need to know about American history for? This dismissive attitude has since bit me in the ass on several occasions. The first I can recall being when I was doing a non-union summer stock production of Shenandoah, the musical set during the Civil War. I had to quietly ask one of my fellow castmates, now which side is the North, the blue guys or the gray guys? Well, I did learn from those articles that Jennie Gourlay was called Jeannie when not on stage. She was born in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1844, the daughter of actor parents. When she was just 3 years old, the family moved to America and settled in Brooklyn. And by the age of 7, Jeannie and her younger sister Maggie joined their parents on stage. I would have killed for a professional start that young. I, however, am not from a theater family. Theatrical, yes, but not a theater family. That wasn't something you saw where I grew up in New Jersey. I now know several Broadway performers raising families very close to my hometown. If this had occurred when I was young and right next door, I would likely have had a restraining order slapped on me before puberty. I can see me in the backyard, crouched behind the fence, waiting for the Broadway people to come outside. Well, they're actors. Surely they'll sing and dance on the lawn. How else do you cut the grass? I can hear the phone call to my parents. Yes, hi, Helen. Yes. He's staring at us. Again. And I'm pretty sure he went through our trash last night. So, for better or worse, there was nobody around to help launch my early career. I made my stage debut in our second grade play at B.N. Forest Elementary School. The play we were mounting is Peter Rabbit, and I'm a natural for the lead. I know how to hop, and I could already hold my flimsy wrists in bunny position. So imagine my surprise when Danny De Parma was cast as the titular rabbit, and I was assigned the role of Radish. Not even the radish, but one of a trio of radishes. It is here that I get my very first taste of just how unfair show business is. And Danny De Parma? Well, he's a 7-year-old hooligan, a teacher's nightmare, who has been rewarded by our teacher with the starring role. I am speechless. Literally. I have no lines. Now, what happens if Danny goes wild, as he is known to do on stage? What then? All of our reputations are blackened before the entire B.N. Forest student body. Is this poor misguided teacher ready to accept the consequences of her choice? The poor misguided woman hasn't even had the good sense to offer me the role of understudy, a position that I would have considered, but only for the good of the production. But no offer. Singing Radish in a rooted Greek chorus. This is a travesty. But it's done. Casting's been announced and parents have been notified. And between you and me, since Danny's daddy is from all appearances connected to the mob, I sincerely doubt a replacement call will be held. As rehearsals limp on, Danny will not take direction and is sketchy on his lines. I decide not to invite anyone. Really, don't waste your time. It doesn't showcase my work. The dress rehearsal finally arrives, and in trots Danny in a perfect Peter Rabbit jacket, an ideal peacock blue felt. His mom made it for him. Oh, did she? Or did it fall off of a truck of rabbit costumes? Everyone, Teacher DeMille included, gathers around him, marveling at this magnificent jacket, made all the more ideal once Danny is crowned with tawny brown bunny ears and a downright sexy cotton tail. I do not join them. I don't want to damage my own costume in the crush. I am wearing a red shirt. Not radish red, red. Not the same red as my fellow radishes. No one has even thought to coordinate matching tops for us. We are, after all, just set dressing. Salad dressing. The object that identifies us as a trio is the radish itself. It is a cutout blob of poster paper which has been painted, not surprisingly, a red that matches none of our tops or has anything to do with radish red. Leftover Valentine red. It's no wonder I'm not fawning over Peter Rabbit over there. This thing will tear if you even look at it. And Mary Beth Tershon has torn hers already. Now she has a shiny stripe of tape across the top of her radish. Thanks, Mary Beth. Thanks for helping us maintain a look here. And speaking of the look, None of the other rabbit costumes are nearly as brilliantly realized as Danny's, but why am I surprised? The balance on this project has been way off since day one. While the rest of the class rustles their paper vegetation, I take my place on stage, a folding chair behind an anemic cardboard fence, and prepare for my long overdue stage debut. Come on, people, let's get this turkey in the oven. The curtain creaks open and we're up, and I like it out here. Oh, I really like it out here. I don't like it out here as much as we begin to sing, mumble our simple choruses. After weeks of vocal rehearsal, Jeff Wilson still has no idea where the cutoffs are. On 4, the D on 4, and look around for food. Finally, our scene arrives. Peter has found his way to the vegetable garden, which has been in plain view of the audience since the curtain opened. Did anyone think he wasn't going to find it? Danny timidly climbs over the fence, cautiously looks around, and then begins to sniff at us. We have not been directed to react. We sit there like vegetables. Danny hops over to me, picks up my arm, and bites me. The little terror actually bites me. Now, this was never even mentioned in the rehearsal process, but suddenly our little star has gone all method on us, and he's bitten me. And gotten a laugh doing it, too. I am outraged. I strongly consider playing the moment, falling off of this chair, rolling into the wings, and finding a bus to New York City. I gotta get out of this Garden State. But instead, I sit there, as directed, and let Danny shine. I am a professional. When it's all over, I take my bow with the rest of the vegetable garden. The only solo bow goes to guess who I am sure has a rabbit-shaped cake awaiting him in a reserved room of a local Italian restaurant. And though it pains me to say it, he did a nice job with the role, biting aside. Not the choices I would have made, perhaps a bit stiff in his physicality, but a solid performance. Who knew? All right, it's not what I had hoped for my stage debut, but it sure beat a day of American history studies. Maybe next year we'll mount Pinocchio, and nobody can play wooden like I can. I had no idea that this pattern was just getting started. And so was my research on Jeannie. It was time to make a show business pilgrimage to the Columns Museum in Milford, Pennsylvania, where, aside from the Lincoln flag, they have 3 of Jeannie's actual stage costumes. Well, that got my blood pumping. And while I am there, I will visit the Milford Cemetery, where Mrs. Jeannie Gourlay Struthers is buried. She ended up a Struthers, and I have found the end of her story. I rent a car on a sweltering August day and drive across the mighty Hudson to Milford. I find the Columns, a small mansion set up on a little hill, and I let myself into the musty foyer where, after a minute or so, I feel like I might be intruding in someone's private home. A staffer comes out. She's a friendly-looking woman, casually dressed for a hot day. No park ranger uniforms here at the Columns. I introduce myself, and she says something like, "Oh, all right, well, there's the flag. Take a look around, and when you want, I can show you the files in the office." And she leaves me to peruse or pocket any of the items on display. Oh, look, a gun. And there's the Lincoln flag prominently displayed in the front parlor. That's bigger than I expected. Rusty blood stain. And beside it is that picture of Jeannie, but this is an actual sepia photograph, not a Xerox of a Xerox. Those eyes again. Here's where it all led. Friendly staffer sets me up with a file on the Lincoln flag and Jeannie. Clearly, the Historical Society's great pride. There are just a couple of articles that I haven't been sent about the Gourlay family and the role they played in a national tragedy. There are several contradictions here, too, all of which annoy me. First, she's not remembered enough, then she's not remembered accurately. There are misspellings of her name, and best of all, one article claims that Gourlay is pronounced, get this, girly. That was almost the title of this show for a little while there. Pronounced girly. Friendly staffer and I climb a couple flights of stairs past roped-off rooms full of furniture and then through a door leading to the column's attic where Jeannie's costumes are stored. It is stifling up here. She pulls out a long flat box and opens it, and I'm looking at an ivory satin skirt with red trim. This was hers. She wore this on stage somewhere. Can I touch? Sure, go ahead. I am overly cautious with this fragile treasure. This feels sacred to me. She was so small. You want to see the other ones? Yes, please. The next box has another ivory satin dress. This one has pale pink stripes with stars woven into it. It is so detailed, so delicate. The last is a golden gown, its metallic threads badly deteriorating with time. I'm told none of them were worn on that night, but they have no idea when they were worn. They used to be on display downstairs, but they'll get worn out down there in a dummy. Clearly, they don't have the huge funds it would take to restore and keep them properly, so they're safest here in the attic. Can I take pictures? Sure, go ahead. And I do. I take a ton of pictures. I know that I'm trying to capture her through these flat, aging costumes. This is exhilarating and heartbreaking. The rental car is as hot as that attic. I have to sit there for a minute as sweat and, yes, tears stream down my face. Why does this all feel so personal? I'm going to assume that I am suffering from a heat stroke. I find the hilly cemetery and eventually find several Struthers family graves, and Jeannie's is among them, under a low, simple headstone shared with her husband, Robert Struthers. This gravesite is not set back among the picturesque trees. It's just off the gravel path, 3 feet maybe. This headstone is no monument, and this is true to the pattern, not nearly as grand as the gravesite that I want for her. Hello, Jeannie. I hope you don't mind my trying to find you, but I want to tell your story, because I can relate, I think. I'll do my best to honor your memory. It's nice to have met you at last. What else is there to say? Well, even I can't wring more drama out of this scene. And yes, the thought of having her speak to me from her gravesite did occur to me, but no. I don't want that for her, or for me, or for you. How did I get here? How have I become somebody who volunteers to drive out of state to an American history museum? This is clearly not who I started out to be. My father is a lover of American history, by which I mean the history of its wars. He has read countless books on the subject, as well as built, fired, and even made lamps out of an arsenal of replica guns. He has enough bayonets and swords to kill off any neighbor that wants to start something. I grew up surrounded by cannons and bald eagles and platoons of miniature soldiers, and that was just on the wallpaper of the bedroom that I shared with my brother, a junior American History of War devotee. We spent 2 weeks every summer away from our wallpaper visiting various historic sites on the East Coast, arrived at by station wagon on a journey begun pre-dawn on a Monday. 2 parents up front, 4 children in the back. I always sat behind my mother, my brother always behind our father. One sister would be wedged between us on the back seat to form a small human neutral zone. The other sister would be stowed in the back with the camping equipment. Oh yes, we were a camping family. What better way to really experience the hardships of our forefathers than by trudging through musty forts all day before returning to the family tent at dusk? 1 tent for all 6 of us. The only thing I liked about that tent was folding back its opening flaps to form a proscenium arch. Not a lot of fun on rainy days. Not a lot of fun on sunny days. I did not cotton to these woodsy vacations. I preferred the seaside. But since battles on U.S. soil were mostly fought on soil, we rarely saw a beach. Still, I knew that I would have been happier there, or at an orphanage. I remember I must have been 8-ish, trudging through some Civil War battlefield in August, as we staggered through the endless grass looking at history. Trees, hills, rocks. My father reported that in one day of battle, 75,000 men had been shot on this very field. I distinctly remember thinking, I wish someone would shoot me. I only ever saw my own bored expression reflected back off of every display case. Oh, look, a gun. Wax museums, however. There was always a wax museum, and I loved them. Well, first off, wax museums are indoors and air-conditioned. Wax, like skinny young boys, has a tendency to melt out of doors in summer. But more than that, a wax museum was theater. Still life theater, yes, except for the rare display with moving parts, a chest that rises and falls as a soldier lays dying. There was usually a recreation of the Lincoln assassination, too, with a booth figure that glides into sight and raises a stiff arm and fires at the back of the presidential figure, who slumps forward slightly. The Mary Todd Lincoln figure sits with her glassy eyes glued to the stage. I identified with her, focused on the theatrical as history happened all around her. But there it all was. Sets, lights, a costumed cast waiting to tell their stories from behind their prosceniums. If I did not share my father and brother's love of Civil War casualties, I sure did fall in love with the fashion of the era, most notably the hoop skirt. Now this was historic. All that taffeta, all that silk and lace. Here was a dress designed to give a lady personal space. And personal space was something that I desperately craved on those endless trips. Space. Imagine being in an open field and feeling like there's a foot on your throat. But that's how I felt. So all hail the hoop skirt and pass me my crayons. I would sit at the picnic table and I would design fabulous gowns festooned with bows and ribbons of magenta, my signature crayon. Gowns designed to waltz in with a Prince Charming or a General Charming. Well, I'm not picky, sir. Just get here and waltz me out of this family vacation tableau. The energy I'm expending to keep my chest rising and falling as I hide my extreme displeasure has exhausted me. I am a Yankee Belle trapped in a parking lot beside a station wagon before yet another monument. Please find me. Suddenly, the Civil War has relevance for me. Well, eventually our historical journeys would end and we would return to our civilian life back at home. We would play with our Hot Wheels racing car track on the basement floor when it was too hot to play outside. Hot Wheels were the cooler Matchbox cars of the 70s, with miles of day-glow orange track that linked together to form different courses. My brother would shove the tracks aside and set up these elaborate miniature battles on the basement floor to reenact the horrors we just visited. On occasion, he'd take a breather and go up to our room and read about the horrors we just visited. Once I was alone, I was free to do my own recreation of something that I had seen on our historical journey. At the age of no more than 10, I discovered something major. If you take Hot Wheels track and you loop it into 3 circles, and then you take some string from the junk drawer in the kitchen and you tie the circles together, and then you tie the strings to a belt, you can make a hoop skirt. Flimsy, yes, crude even. Certainly not capable of sustaining the weight of a winter velvet or the heft of a satin, but suitable for a bed sheet. Well, sadly, all of our bed sheets were in pale, washed-out colors. There was no magenta to be found. But this was not a time to be picky. I would just tie my loops together, I would step into the center, and I would raise the belt to my waist, and I would cinch it really tight. I would whip that bed sheet around me. You want a flat sheet, not a fitted sheet. Fitted sheets only work for making bustles, and that is an entirely different era. The back was kind of hard to tuck in all by myself, but I did the best that I could without the help of my mammy. And then I would stand there for just a second, and then I would begin to sway. And as my hoop skirt begins to move with a rhythm all its own, I begin to feel the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 waltz tempo start in my head. I would fold a piece of paper into a fan, and I would draw some flowers and birds on it, and I would hold it delicately at my side, and I would wait. I would wait for a handsome gentleman in uniform to ask permission to take my hand and lead me around the ballroom floor. I would bat my eyes demurely, fan myself, and softly gush, "Why, Colonel, it would be an honor." And then I waltz with this strong, kind sir, and I smile. I know that this encounter will be fleeting, that this dashing soldier will likely be off to war on the morrow, one of 75,000 men shot by nightfall, killed by an enemy that looks a lot like my brother. I know that this sheet must be folded and put back in the linen closet before it is missed. I know that this track is for racing cars, and I know that I'm the only boy in New Jersey, maybe even the whole world, who dreams this dream while wide awake. But just for this moment, I waltz with this strong man. Our cares are miles away. We glide. I am safe in his light, respectful embrace. We whirl. Can I help but titter? Yes, we are at war, but for now, we are at peace. And then I hear the garage door opening. Daddy's home from work. It's time to join the rest of the troop in the mess hall. This dream must be interrupted and put back in its display case. A display case that only I can view, in a museum that I alone can visit, when I need a vacation. I'm thinking that Jeannie and I had very different childhoods. Whereas she was a full-time dramatic actress, I was just full-time dramatic. And she got a lot better press than I did, too. One account claims that in her youth, she was an accomplished actress of a marked patrician type of beauty, with a sweetness and magnetism that made her a popular favorite with audiences, all of which led her to Ford's Theater. And speaking of Ford's, I should probably put on a park ranger costume for this next bit, but I'm going to spare you. On August 27, 1863, Jeannie's 19th birthday, John T. Ford opened this state-of-the-art theater. And by the following season, Miss Jennie Gourlay was the company's leading lady. She's just 20 years old and the leading lady of a leading theater in the nation's capital. When visiting stars are touring through, she graciously steps aside and supports them. Jeannie is on the threshold of stardom. I know it. I don't think just anybody in the company is afforded a benefit performance, and she's about to have hers. Now, perhaps this benefit performance is a wedding gift to Jeannie and her fiancé, Ford's orchestra leader, Professor William Withers. Aside from being a leading lady about to be a star, Jeannie is also about to be a bride, and the news only gets better. On April 9th, 1865, Palm Sunday, the Civil War ends. The nation is rejoicing, and nowhere more so than in Washington, D.C., and Miss Laura Keene is in town. She's appearing at Ford's Theater, supported by the entire stock company. She will be ending her 2-week stint with that popular favorite, Our American Cousin, and John Wilkes Booth is in town as well. He just happens to stop by Ford's on the morning of April 14th, Good Friday, where he learns that the Lincolns will be attending the theater that night. A rehearsal of that evening's show is taking place. Jeannie is called and on stage. Her fiancé, Professor Withers, is also hoping to hold a rehearsal of his song, Honor to Our Soldiers. It is to be premiered on this very special night by the entire company and the entire audience, led by Miss Keene after the first act. Booth is making his plans for the night as well. You see, he is very familiar with the American Cousin script. He knows where the biggest laugh in the show is, and he knows if he is to fire a pistol during that laugh, he will afford himself the best possible exit while the audience is preoccupied. He knows that his moment to act is in Act 3, Scene 2. The official program from that night lists T.C. Gourlay in the role of Sir Edward Trenchard. Miss M. Gourlay, Sister Maggie, is playing Skillet, a servant, and Miss J. Gourlay is listed as playing Mary Trenchard. They've all played these roles before, all but Booth. Places! Act 1 begins before the president and party have arrived. You can only hold so long, even for the president. Once he arrives and acknowledges the overjoyed audience, the show continues. After Act 1, Professor Withers is informed that Miss Keene is unprepared to present his song, Honor to Our Soldiers, but she may be ready between Acts 2 and 3. Act 2 goes without a hitch. Booth has arrived, and a stagehand is holding his horse in the rear alley. After Act 2, Professor Withers is again informed that Miss Keene is unprepared to present his song. He is now irate and discussing the situation in the stage right wing as Act 3 begins. The first scene of the third act is between Jeannie and Harry Hawk, playing Asa Trenchard, the suddenly rich American cousin who has fallen in love with her character. During their scene, Booth enters from the back of the house and makes his way up to the presidential box. After her scene, Jeannie makes her way around to the stage right wing and talks with her fiancé, probably about what a bitch Laura Keene is refusing to do his song. Act 3, Scene 2 begins. The American cousin is now talking with a dowager mother and her gold-digging daughter. As the women leave in a huff, the mother says, "I'm aware, Mr. Trenchard, you're not used to the manners of good society, and that alone will excuse the impertinence of which you have been guilty." The American cousin is alone on stage, and he says, get ready for that big laugh I told you about. He says, "Don't know the manners of good society, eh? Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old gal. You sock-dollar-jizing old man trap." And the house erupts in laughter. And a pistol is fired. That line, the lines leading up to that line, the moments leading up to that moment, every time I think them, every time I see them, every time I say them, my brain is screaming, here it comes, here it comes. Why is this moment so upsetting to me? So a pistol has been fired. From here, the details get fuzzy. Everyone has a different account of where they were and what they saw. I do know that Jeannie is in the stage right wing, and here is how one of her fellow castmates recounts her reaction. He claims that when he told her that the president had been shot, she, quote, "went down to the floor in a faint." I sincerely doubt that that actually happened, but sure, why not? It's the era of the fainting couch, for pity's sake. Ladies did it all the time. Shocking news? Faint. What would it be like if people just reacted that way today? Ooh. Dear Mr. Hipkins, we regret to inform you that your play has not been selected for presentation because you are an also-ran. Oh, I wish that I could get away with that. Maybe just on matinee days? After the gunshot, federal marshals raced in and ordered the theater cleared. Anyone lingering backstage will be shot. The audience and the growing mob in the street want the theater burned to the ground and the actors killed on the spot. One of them has shot the president. They're all guilty. Several members of the company join the Gourlay family at their home, where they spend a very tense night. They know that the president will not survive this attack, that their lives are very much in danger. The future of their entire profession uncertain. The War Department ordered Ford's Theater closed indefinitely. Miss Jennie Gourlay's benefit performance of the Octoroon was canceled. She kept an official program from that night as a prize memento. Her name is at the bottom in capital letters, announcing the performance that she never gave. The following morning, President Abraham Lincoln died at 7:22 a.m. in a house directly across the street from Ford's Theater. It was raining heavily that morning. When Mrs. Lincoln was taken from that house and saw Ford's across the street, she said, "Oh, that dreadful house." That house would not see another play again until 1968. It did, however, see one more performance. Immediately following the president's death, the Secretary of War ordered a full run-through of Our American Cousin. Several members of the company were brought from prison to play their parts for an audience of 50 or so detectives. They played that light comedy for that grim audience exactly as they had on April 14th, right up to the gunshot. I can imagine their voices echoing in the mostly empty house as they played through their spirited dialogue, all the while wondering if an arsonist was about to burn the building down around them. How could one of their own, their friend Wilkes, have done this to them? And who among them had known and helped? And is my karma attached to this? A little while back, I did an internet search of my own name. Among the listings of my small acting appearances, about as many as you'll find for Miss Jennie Gourlay, was the following: Billy Hipkins, an actor at Ford's Theater. Booth was well known there and knew Billy Hipkins. ... The link led to a dead page, and I was unable to track down whoever wrote that. That partial sentence was all I got. If there was another Billy Hipkins at Ford's Theater, what was his part in all of this? So now I'm looking for two people. Immediately following the president's death, the nation went into a 10-day period of mourning. And the day the mourning ended, on April 25th, Jeannie and William Withers were married. And on their wedding night, early in the morning hours of April 26th, John Wilkes Booth was hunted down and shot in a barn near Port Royal, Virginia. He died there just before dawn. Among the possessions found on him were a portrait of his fiancée, as well as the portraits of 4 actresses. Miss Jennie Gourlay was not among them. Once they were free to leave D.C., the newlywed Withers took off for Memphis, where they joined a brand new acting company there. And that fall, none other than Miss Laura Keene came to town to perform with the entire stock company. On 3 of those nights, they presented Our American Cousin, with 6 members of the Ford's Theater cast on stage together again. And as Act 3, Scene 2 approached, as they said the lines leading up to that line, that's acting. Within a year, Jeannie was in Norwich, Connecticut, filing a petition for divorce from her husband of less than 2 years on the grounds of intolerable cruelty. The suit was unopposed and the divorce was granted, and neither Jeannie nor William would ever publicly acknowledge their marriage for the rest of their lives. So now what? Her shot at stardom didn't come true at Ford's. Her marriage has ended in divorce. It sure doesn't look like any of her dreams are coming true, so now what? There is a point at which just soldiering on and starting all over again gets rather tough to do. I should know. I did plenty of that in my own career. After years of summer stock and regional theater appearances, I finally landed in the cast of an original Broadway show. Broadway! At last! I was cast in Anna Karenina, the musical. The musical. I was a late addition to the company after it became clear during rehearsals that they were going to need a couple of extras on hand. Just a couple of servants as extras to help move scenery and samovars, and that's what I was offered. An extras contract and a lifting belt to wear under my costume. As an extra on a Broadway stage, I was making less money than I was on unemployment. Living the dream! Please allow me to show you exactly what I did in Anna Karenina, the musical. Oh, I'm going to be using music from Fiddler on the Roof here. I've completely blocked out the entire Anna K score. Thank you. Thank you. Oh. Woo. Wow. We ran for 10 whole weeks. I did not receive a Tony nomination. And after it was all over, I started out all over again, but with a Broadway credit on my resume. A credit that left me feeling secretly ashamed and confused and dismayed. It wasn't supposed to be like that. So now what? More auditioning, more work, more triumph, more disappointment, and more research on Jeannie, which led to another photograph. Now, I'm not exactly sure when this one was taken, but I'm going to say it is post-divorce. It is a photograph that says, "I am back and better than ever." She is now in New York City, where she is lending capable support to Mrs. Jean Landers, another woman with her own acting company. And while she's touring with the Landers Company, Jeannie played the title role in Fanchon the Cricket. Now, she didn't play an actual cricket, but it is a role that Jeannie would ultimately play upward of 800 times. And it is a role that had made some other actress a household name. Here we go again. Now, what would it have taken for her to land a plum role and make it all her own? Was that even a possibility for her? Other actresses are doing exactly that all around her. She is well known among them, liked and respected. I've read that she played star engagements. Where? In what tome can I find those quotes and reviews? Where is her Wikipedia page? I'm going to write her one as soon as I'm done restoring her costumes in Pike County. We can't all be Laura Keene. Okay, back to Laura Keene. Further research has shown that I may have been remiss in my assertions about her. I can't actually find any reference to any personal vanity anywhere in any accounts of her. An imperious managerial style, yes, that much seems clear. Lots of lawsuits were fought with actors over pay and with theaters over infringement rights on Our American Cousin. Lawsuits that helped form copyright law as we know it today. The woman truly was a front-runner in a ton of theater practices and norms that we now take for granted. To be a woman and to tirelessly achieve what she did, no small feat, I assure you. It just doesn't look as though she felt any competition from younger actresses in her company, so I can no longer call her the villain of this piece. For all I know, she did everything in her power to help guide and support Jenny's career. For all I know, she was Jenny's idol. But I'm still going to call her a butterface. You got to see this. Look at her! She looks like Harpo Marx in drag. (1868). Jeannie has now met Robert Struthers, another member of Mrs. Lander's company, and just before her 24th birthday, they are married. But she continues to act as Miss Jennie Gourlay. This photo was taken of her at that time, and she sure looks like a star to me. She also looks like she's taking her pulse. Or the pulse of her career, maybe. Anything, but it doesn't matter. She has more than just a career now. She's given birth to a daughter, Mabel. And shortly after Mabel arrived, her husband arranged a tour for his actress wife of England and Scotland. I found her actual London reviews from Fanshawe the Cricket. Reviews, finally! Miss Jennie Gourlay comes amongst us with a great transatlantic prestige. No signs of success were wanting on Saturday evening, and Miss Gourlay was greeted with genuine enthusiasm. Her manner is brisk and full of meaning. She regularly brought down the house. Atta girl. And get this one. Her appearance when she jumps through the cottage window in quest of her pet hen stamped her at once in the minds of the audience as a picturesque, dramatic figure. I gotta read that cricket play. Now, in my experience, there are two types of actors. Those that read their reviews and those that lie about reading their reviews. I always read mine, the good and the bad, and I have some of my personal highlights for you right here, right now. From my first star engagement. Outstanding among the actors was Billy Hipkins, a 7th grader whose portrayal of Oliver was winsome and most appealing. Summer stock in Pennsylvania in Camelot. Billy Hipkins does a fine job in his supporting role of a mincing and evil Mordred. More stock. Billy Hipkins has Frank Gorshin as the Riddler looks, which he uses to good advantage. Playing a transsexual in a Jewish family dramedy in Boca. Billy Hipkins is often moving and funny, but just as often his performance is overdone. Overdone! I shouted that for a full week after I read that review. The rest of the cast wanted to kill me. Overdone! And finally, for my last stock appearance in Bells Are Ringing in Vermont. Billy Hipkins walks around like a disoriented rooster. His chest puffed out, his body swaying from side to side as he skitters across the stage. Same show, different paper. Also awful is Billy Hipkins, who moves about as if he were crossed with a pompous chicken or is the marionette of a puppeteer suffering from Parkinson's. That was it. My very last professional appearance. I was done soldiering on. I got the point. My shot at stardom had not come true. Oh well. I'd had a lot of fun. I'd seen a lot of malls. I also had my mom embroider me a pillow. It says, "Also awful." I keep it as a prized memento of my long journey to Also-Ran. And as successful as Jeannie's London appearance was, it did not lead her to stardom either. So she and William moved back to the States and settled in Brooklyn. Now, How hard was that decision for her to make? Was she also getting the point that no matter how well she does, she's not a star? She will not be a star. This is where my wants for her, like my own wants, where my idea of fair gets tangled in the facts. Well, she does, after all, have a husband and a family, enough trooping around, right? Maybe. Maybe for her it was easier to just go home and act locally while being a wife and a mother, and that's what she did. She continued to act locally. And while she continued to act, she also continued to have children. JENNIE GOURLAY Struthers ultimately had 7 children and buried 3 of them in infancy. She cared for her sister Maggie's son when Maggie died in childbirth and watched that son die of cholera at the age of 4. One of her own surviving daughters went blind from scarlet fever at the age of 3. The old saying goes, people were made of sturdier stock then. It appears as though babies were not. By then it was 1880, and as of that year, there are no further appearances by the actress Miss JENNIE GOURLAY to be found in any reference I've seen. She would have been about 36 years old. This picture was taken of her that year. I find it hard to accept that this is how Jeannie's career panned out. It is not what I want to have happened for her. It was time to contact Ford's Theater and ask to see any and all records they had on JENNIE GOURLAY and that other Billy Hipkins if he existed. At some point, Ford's was taken over by the National Park Service. That explains those park rangers. And while I'm talking to the on-site curator, as I'm talking about it, about her, I begin to tear up over the phone. I no longer have any emotional control around this story. Hopefully she thinks I got something stuck in my throat. Of all the months I've planned my trip for January, the Capitol is cold and gray. The buildings are cold and gray. I realize you never see a photograph of DC that was not taken in springtime. I head to Ford's early so I can visit the basement museum first, and surprise, I immediately tear up upon entering the building. Oh, this is weird. It's too close to me somehow. Was I can hardly even say it. Was I here in a past life? Was I JENNIE GOURLAY? The other Billy Hipkins? Did I shoot Lincoln? Oh. It's too much, it's too much. Luckily, the friendly park rangers stationed in the lobby don't seem to notice my just this side of overwhelmed state. The renovation they've done since my last visit is extensive and impressive, complete with a gift shop full of mugs and Lincoln dolls and, oh look, a gun. In the basement museum, I find the case containing the theater's artifacts, and there's that handbill again, with Jeannie's benefits still on the schedule. Okay, I pull it together before meeting the curator. I don't want to frighten the poor girl. She doesn't need to know that I'm entertaining the probability of a past life recall here. I am hoping to find actual records from the theater, a roster of Ford stock company, a list of plays presented and when. None of this remains there. And that other Billy Hipkins? Never heard of the guy. Yes, they have a file on JENNIE GOURLAY, mostly containing those articles about the Lincoln flag, which I've already seen. There is some new information, and I'm grateful to find it. The curator was willing to photocopy this mountain of material for me. I know that I am grasping at any mention of her. Like, if I can find enough photocopies of photocopies, I can put her together and make her whole and real again. On the way out, I go back to the basement and stare at that handbill some more. Yes, JENNIE GOURLAY was here. And Billy Hipkins? Still a mystery. I found an interview with Mrs. JENNIE GOURLAY Struthers from her porch in Milford in 1913. Her husband, Robert, had died of palsy after being an invalid for many years, and now, 6 years after his passing, when she was nearly 70 years old, after a lifetime of refusing to speak publicly about what she had witnessed, she spoke. And this is what she had to say. So you've come to talk over those old sad days. Well, I seldom speak anymore of that fateful night, but whenever I meet anyone that remembers President Abraham Lincoln, I always feel a sorrowful satisfaction in talking over that final performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater. I'm glad to say that I was not on the stage at the time the president was shot. As I recall, I began the first scene of the third act. Harry Hawk followed to the second scene and held the stage alone at the time of the shooting. His voice was probably the very last that President Lincoln ever heard. But I've always felt that Booth selected the time that I was acting my part to prepare for his attack. My scene was between Asa Trenchard and Mary Meredith, I taking the part of the latter, although on the official program I appeared as Mary Trenchard. It was a printer's error. We sat down near the center of the stage, and Asa asked Mary's permission to light a cigar. I gave consent, and with the match with which he lit the cigar, he also set fire to a document. Now, this document, according to the plot, was a will which he was interested in having destroyed. It was a vital point in the drama and held the rapt attention of the audience. What more propitious moment could Booth have had to prepare for the shooting? While I was speaking, I saw Booth standing near the Lincoln box. As he had access to the theater at all times, I thought nothing of his being there. He was a very handsome man, was Booth. Perhaps the handsomest I ever saw. The very picture of health. But I remember that as I saw him then, I was shocked at his pallor and a wild look in his eyes. It flashed across me, he must be sick. I can recall April 14th, 1865. I was very happy, as a benefit performance was scheduled on the program to be given on Saturday, April 15th, for Miss Jennie Gourlay. You probably remember that Laura Keene had starred in Our American Cousin over 1,000 nights, and the performance at which the assassination occurred was to have been her last, and it was given in her benefit. The following night, I was to have had my benefit. But of course, it never took place. Well, not only I, but everyone else seemed happy, for the war was over. The bloodshed had stopped. North and South families were to be reunited, and the blessings of peace would help us to forget the sufferings and sorrows of war. And then that awful bullet. There was no personal gain for Booth in shooting President Lincoln. There could have been none. As he lay dying in agony after he was shot down in the barn, he feebly muttered, "Tell my mother that I died for my country and did what I thought was best." I knew Booth well. I and the rest of our company liked Wilkes Booth. Everybody liked him. I believe that he was sincere when he sent that dying message to his mother. To us who knew him well, it was hard to believe the worst of him. Every now and then, one friend or another sends me a clipping about what happened that night at Ford's Theater. As a rule, these clippings are so untrue to the facts that they disgust me. 5 of my family, counting myself, were in the theater that night, so I know about what took place. I was behind the wings near the orchestra leader, Professor Withers, and I remember hearing the report of the pistol. After he fired the fatal shot, Booth jumped to the stage. Now, in doing so, his spur caught in the folds of an American flag and threw him, breaking a bone in his leg. As he stood upon the stage, wild and desperate, fiercely trampling the flag to free himself, the truth was not realized, but when he cried, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants, and a moment or so later, Mrs. Lincoln screamed. The audience, in a dazed way, began to comprehend the awful calamity that had occurred. From the wings, I saw Booth painfully make his way across the stage. As he ran limping by us in the wings, he brushed me aside, made his way to the rear door, and escaped. About that time, I began to understand the cause of the confusion. My father then took Laura Keene up to the president's box. She held his head in her hands, and his blood trickled down her dress. She turned his head slightly, and the wound was for the first time definitely located. The blood that fell stained her hands, and a moment or so later, as she sobbed, never will I forget the picture of this heretofore carefree, light-hearted comedienne, now blood-stained from head to foot, convulsed in sobs, playing her part in the most harrowing tragedy that ever took place inside of a theater. My father was one of the men that helped to carry President Lincoln from the theater to the house opposite where he died. I can still see them carrying that gaunt, awkward form through the aisles. My tears were mingled with those of the nation, for we all loved honest old Abe. Great as he was at heart just a big, brave, sympathetic friend to us all. It was not her intention to allow her thoughts to be made public when she sat with this visitor, so why did she consent? Did she see her own mortality up close and want to set the record straight on her part in history once and for all? Or was it just one more chance to visit the public attention just one more time? Maybe. But more than that, I see grace. After 50 years of perspective, after 50 years of learning to live with events as they were, grace. Mrs. Jeannie Gourlay Struthers had an acting career for close to 30 years. She had appeared in 7 New York productions and had toured extensively here and abroad. She was referred to as a well-seasoned and moderately successful actress in her time. I believe that she was proud of what she had accomplished when she willingly left the stage. She went on to live a long life and eventually died of a stroke at the age of 83. Funeral services were held at the Edwin Forrest Home for Retired Actors before burial in Milford Cemetery. And I've learned about as much as I can about Jeannie Gourlay's life and career. Waiting to find out more would be pointless because what I want to find is the document that tells me that she was happy. And nobody can tell me that. Well, even if her now distant relatives were to come forward and offer insight, what could they say with any certainty? Oh yes, she was as content as could be. Or great-great-grandmother Jeannie was a deeply unhappy woman. Not a day went by that she didn't sigh and moan, if only, before going down to the floor in a faint. I don't want that to be her story, so maybe I shouldn't ask. No. I choose to believe that she graciously accepted the fact that fate had stepped in and fired a gun. That yes, she grieved, and then she got on with her life. And maybe it never was Jeannie Gourlay's dream to be a famous actress upon the stage. It's my dream for her. It was my dream too. It's still my dream. I believe that I am here now to set the record straight for both of us. To stop telling the also-ran story, to instead say that we were both in the running. We both did our best. I don't have time to say if only every day, and I don't own a fainting couch, and my story isn't done yet. Okay. There was a girl named Jeannie Gourlay who was there when, and there was a man named Billy Hipkins who now faces the everyday challenges of his life, just as all the great and small people in history have done before him. He is particularly heartened and inspired by this girl's journey, so he does his best to follow her example and soldier on in her honor for her benefit.